Now, last time I was playing around with the thermal circulation implant. It worked flawlessly. It gave the ship a lot of extra tank, and at the same time it also gave the ship a lot of extra DPS. Now, besides the thermal circulation, we also have the high power coil implant, and both have been buffed in the recent April patch. The thermal circulation has received a very nice buff in the overall duration. Now it lasts much longer, and they also have reduced the implant usage, which helps at reducing the cost. Now this build is I would say, a cross between DPS and tank. I have tank rigs and I have tank modules. Meanwhile, I have the DPS rigs installed, and it should give some pretty decent defensive capabilities, and it also gives me some very nice DPS. And the rigs, the engineering rigs, are also the same. Now, you can swap the DPS rigs into the armor tank rigs. Doesn't have to be integrations. Today I'll show you the different builds with the normal rigs. With one anti-explosive rig, 46% explosive resistance, and you can actually keep it this way. Now you covered most of the holes, but if you want to go full tank, you can easily do that. And now I will add one anti-thermal and one anti-kinetic pump, and I will increase the resistance on the armor quite a bit. Now this build works with a active tank, works with a passive armor tank, works with armor plates. For a more active tank, I would probably go with one nanobot accelerator, which will improve the armor repairer. And you can also play around with the general units to improve the armor repair even more. So you have a lot of options here. Now let me go to the implant and let's select the high power coil. Now again, level 15 and level 30 would be, I would say, okay, and I wouldn't go above level 30 with most implants, and this one is included. Once you activate the implant, it gives you plus 50% extra DPS. Now thermal circulation kicks in at heat 70, while the high power coil basically kicks in the moment you click on it. Both have a short duration, although the duration of the thermal circulation is super short. Basically lasts from 70 to 99, and then you have to turn it off, or if you overheat, then you lose DPS. The high power coil is much easier to use, but it doesn't give you the same DPS. The high power coil does give less DPS, but it is more sustained, while the thermal circulation gives you a lot of DPS, but it lasts for a very short amount of time. So let's take a look at the stats. 2,600 DPS, which is honestly really good for a full tank build. 74, 88 and 72% resistance. 359,000 hit points. The capacitor lasts 6 minutes. With the afterburner, 566.43 meters per second, which honestly is not bad, but it's not good as well. It's definitely faster than a Battlegorn, that's for sure, but it's not the fastest battleship with an afterburner. 3,155.43 DPS once you activate the high power coil implant, which honestly is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the current DPS output. It is pretty solid for a tank ship.
Docking request accepted.
Now let me dock and let me swap the build. Now I talked about using a passive shield tank on my Vindicator. Well, I prefer an active armor tank on this ship, and at the same time also prefer a passive shield tank. That's basically how I run the Serpente ships. They can do both, although primarily they are armor tanks and they have a lot of armor to begin with, so in most cases you can do a armor tank just fine, but in some instances you can also do a shield tank. If you, let's say, specialize the ship for, let's say, DPS, and if you have a glass DPS build, a shield tank is definitely going to work really well. But again, an armor tank is also the way to go, and armor tank is actually what I usually prefer. Works incredibly well against lasers. Against relevance, shields are the way to go because of the high resistance. You can do dual EM or basically one EM thermal and explosive, but in most cases you will have a hole because you only have like 3 rig slots, and that's fine. The hole can be easily covered with the adaptive harness, and in the future the hole can be easily covered if we have a specific damage type resistance module. And well, this is how the passive full resistance PvP build would look like. Shield tank, of course. I used this on the Coil, it worked really well, and I believe it will work really well on this ship as well. With a build like this, you can technically go with triple
Undocking.
railgun burst adapters, because you already have default high resistance once all the modules kick in. And let me show you the maximum. Let me show you the resistance with this build. And also let me charge the implant. The DPS should be about the same. 524,000 hit points, 89, 87, 86 and 87% resistance. Honestly, pretty balanced and looks really awesome. Now the micro warp drive speed, 1.2 kilometers per second, which is quite fast, and the overall tank now 1.5 million hit points when you activate the damage control. Overall, you have a really good tank, and you will also have some very nice DPS, almost 4,000, 3,855.43 DPS, which is pretty good. Pretty solid DPS output, and so again, a really solid tank as well. You can do this build with dual large extenders, also primarily a PvP build. And with extenders you can also add some general units. This is optional, of course. You don't have to if you don't have the slots for it, but just giving you an idea. You can enhance the shield extenders, and you can also enhance the micro warp drive output boost. Basically, now the ship is tankier, and now the ship is going a little bit faster as well. Overall, a very solid combination. Let's unlock, and let me show you the active stats of the ship now. Now you have a lot more shield now, but less resistance. And I'm the type of player who prefers to have more resistance over more hit points, but ideally I would like to combine the best of both worlds. So you can do that with some ships, but you can't do that with some other ships. And again, a pretty good tank. 1.4 km per second is the micro warp drive speed, which is still really solid. And now the damage control, 1.5 million hit points, 95, 94, 93 and 93, about the same, but you have 76,000 hit points in shield, which is a good increase over the 50,000 shield hit points that you have with the previous build. And now back on the DPS oriented build. Dual magnetic field stabilizers, dual adapters and 1 damage control, 4,756.82 DPS with the burst adapter rigs. This build, I like it. I actually like it a lot more than the full glass build, because now this thing is actually quite tanky. It has a lot of very nice shield buffer, and you can do a armor tank with the same way. Also works really well. So you have basically the shield and armor option available on this ship. The DPS is fantastic. It should be able to melt through most ships. 1.4 km per second is the Mach warp speed. 287,000 hit points. Overall defense 60, 68, 79 and 80%, which honestly is pretty good. Has good resistance for a DPS ship, and it should last quite a bit, especially with the damage control. 5.8 thousand and now 6.9 thousand. Nice. With the high power collective, 10,341.54 DPS. Again, very solid and fantastic DPS output. I mean, not many ships will be able to live through this. The only issue will be the tanky battleships. They can withstand this DPS. And now we can do this build, which is identical to my Macariel build, only with gyro stabilizers, and this is the build that I mostly use on my Macariel nowadays. Works fantastically, works in a fantastic manner, no issues with it whatsoever, and overall the tank is still holding really well. You will be surprised how much a build like this can tank. Usually the fights are short, and in the short fights it does work really well. In the longer fights you want a lot more buffer, or you want a active tank, but ideally in longer fights you want a active tank. 732,000 hit points, 8, 84, 89 and 90%. Again, really good, and it should last for quite a bit. Now let's charge up the implant, and let me show you the implant stats. Now, I said level 15 or level 30 is more than enough. Well, if you really like the ship, level 30 would be ideal. Level 15 also works really well. You have some very nice attributes, and here are the skills or the attributes that I picked. All of the attributes are fantastic, and it doesn't really matter which one you pick. All of them will work in a very good way. So again, whichever you pick, it should be nice, but this is my current combination for DPS, and I like it. It does work really well. 5.1 thousand DPS, and here you can take a look at the damage on the railguns. 1,196 on thermal and 1,120 on kinetic, so you will be mostly doing damage on thermal, which is good for we'll be doing some good damage on armors, and this is why the railguns are good for armors. They are munching through armor like nothing, and they work in the same way as lasers do on shields, which is very interesting. And let's check out the maximum DPS, 9.4 thousand DPS with the first magnetic stab, and 7,707 DPS with the implant active, with only the implant active. 11,244, and with the last one 12,533.19 DPS. Again, really solid, really good, and you also have some very nice tank to go along with that high DPS. Okay, well, time to show you a PvE build. Now this time I'll be doing a shield tank PvE build, and it's basically the same build but shield as the previous time. I find it to work really well. A high sec only build, by the way. Don't use this in low sec because you can get jumped quite easily and you can get killed quite easily by pirates. So yeah, only for high sec. Use this build only for high sec islands and things like that. It should work really well. Now let me quickly show you the maximum DPS that you can have with this, and then we can go and do some. Then we can go and blast something, and the main the main thing that I like to do here is to blow up ships. Okay, 5.3 thousand DPS. The tank also is okay. You don't need a lot of tank for high sec. And again, the speed of this ship is still okay. I mean, no afterburner, so it's fine as it is. 7.8 thousand with the third one. It's 8.7 thousand with the last one. 9190.50 DPS, and with the implant active it's 13,741.08 DPS, which is, as I've said many times before, fantastic DPS. And a lot of players are swapping to the Megatron Striker and the Vindicator for PvE because there is a... I mean, I've heard that the Vindicator is now clearing high-sec islands faster than a Apocalypse Striker. I don't know how accurate that is. I mean, you tell me if you replaced your ship with a Vindicator or with a Megatron Striker. I've heard a lot of players say that they have replaced the Apocalypse Striker, but I'm not really sure because still the Apocalypse has some very good range and it has some very good DPS output. It's not as high as the DPS on the other Battleship, but it has range, which is something that the blasters, for example, lack. And you can technically use the railguns, but I don't really like to use railguns because of their poor tracking. The rifled long-range railguns, they have poor tracking, but technically you can use them. Although I'm just not I just don't like to use the long-range weapons on the Vindicator. After all, this ship is designed to be used at close range. Now, the Serpentis webs are known to be one of the strongest, if not the strongest webs in the game. They basically make your target immobile, and that means they can't move, and if they can't move, then you can basically hit them a lot easier. Has excellent applications in PvP, and it works the same way in PvE as well. So far, it's going pretty good. Now, one thing that I would definitely replace on the ships are the engineering rigs. If you want a specifically PvE focused Vindicator, go with the targeting rigs because the lock-on time on this thing is not the best. And as you can see, it does take a while to lock on the small targets, much longer than some of the other ships. So targeting rigs are definitely one of the ways to go if you want to use this ship for PvE. It can also work for PvP, but for PvP, depending on what build you have, I would most likely go with the capacitor rigs, auxiliary thrusters. Speed in PvP on this ship is important. You want to get within range as quickly as possible, especially if we consider the fact that railguns have short range. Now, the range on the railguns has been improved with one of the recent updates. Basically, when they have introduced the new skills, they have improved the range of the railguns quite a lot, actually, and that problem is kinda solved, but still you have short range on the blasters, on the railguns, and you definitely want to get in the web range as quickly as possible in order to keep the target from warping away. And that's how I usually used this ship. Of course, I haven't been flying the Vindicator in a very long time, and that's mostly because I focused on some of the other ships that I have, but I do plan to return to this ship, and I do plan to use it for PvP. It will be built about the same, well, not about the same, but it will be built in the exact same way that I show you here. After all the builds that you see here are the builds that I actively used, or that I will actively use. That way I know that the build is working. Okay, that was a pretty smooth first mission. Let's go to the next one just to show you
engaged.
how
Destination
the
reached.
ship would perform if you were to go and run some PvE with it. When I think about it, I think if you can actually combine the targeting
Warp
rays
drive
with the
active.
warp rigs, they also should work really well. After all, the Vindicator is not the fastest warping ship, and fast warp times do help a lot with the clear times. And the Apocalypse Tracker, for example, has the bonus on lock speed, so that's also one aspect of the Apocalypse Tracker that is better than this one. Although the Megatron Tracker also has the same bonus, I think, so that ship
under attack.
can technically, technically lock faster. I'll find that out very soon.
We're under attack.
Which makes me wonder, how much DPS can I get out of the Megatron Striker? So, this is the second mission here, and how do I usually approach? Now, the approach range is set to be at 10 kilometers, should be enough. In most cases, you want to focus down the small ships first, because if they get too close, it might get a bit difficult to hit them, even with the tracking bonuses and even with the new skills. The smaller ships are still quite easy to miss, so in order to maximize the clear time, focus down the smaller ships first. They should pop quite fast, so it's not a big problem.
We're under attack.
And then you can basically focus down on the other larger ships. The destroyers are easy to hit, and it will not be a big problem. And my microphone died for 30 seconds. My apologies for that. Sometimes it happens when I accidentally move around and the microphone gets unplugged. Yeah, it happens. Well, so far, it's a pretty smooth run.
We're under attack.
Trying to focus down the frigate, but their ship doesn't wanna listen to the command, which is typical. Now the capacitor technically lasts about 30 minutes, but in real use that's actually a lot higher, and it's not a big problem. The capacitor does recharge quite nicely if you... Well, it actually recharges nicely if you warp from... By the time you warp from your first mission to the second mission, the capacitor does recharge a bit. The Vindicator has I would say a pretty good capacitor, although obviously not the best. Some of the other ships have a much better capacitor. For example, the Rattlesnake has a better capacitor, I think. The Balgorn has the best capacitor out of all faction battleships. The Nestor, actually no, the Nestor isn't that good with the capacitor. I will check it out in a moment if the servers are open, because I'm recording this on the
Pilot engaged. Destination reached.
on the patch day, and server is up. Okay, let's log in and let's see the capacity performance on these ships, because I'm actually curious to compare them. If I remember correctly, the Vindicator should have a pretty good capacitor, but wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst as well. It was pretty solid. So, market, let's go to battleships. Okay. Vindicator, it has 11,907 gigajoule capacitor.
We're
Nestor
under
has
attack.
about 8.5. Well, actually, the Vindicator
We're
has one of the
under
best
attack.
capacitors. Okay. Yeah, it has a better capacitor than the Rattlesnake. Very interesting. So, capacitor is definitely not going to be a problem with this ship, and that's why the active shield tank can work really well. And since the shield tank can work well, the armor tank will work even better, because the armor repairs don't use nearly as much
We're
capacitor
under
as the
attack.
shield boosters. I remember the time when the armor repairs were bad. Well, now they're
We're
actually
under
fantastic,
attack.
and most of my ships nowadays are armor tanks. Works extremely well if you combine the thermocirculation with an armor tank. The thermocirculation works on all armor tanks. It's just a fantastic all-around implant, honestly. But if you want to get the full effect, then you want to use railguns. Technically, you can improve the tank even more, but that would require you to have one railgun on a non-railgun ship. And that would be kinda weird, but it is one of the ways how you can improve the tank even more. I haven't done it. I haven't done it yet. My thermocirculation is on level 30. But I might do a
Enemy
troll
ships
ship
detected.
with one of the
We're
with the
being
Abaddon or with the
scrambled.
Vindicator. I don't really know which one, but one of the two will
We're
definitely
under attack.
be used for that. Can get 99-98% resistance easily, which is hilarious. And my only ship currently that has such resistance is the Revelation. That thing is a monster. That thing is one of the tankiest ships currently in the game, and it is actually being used in combat. It's doing a pretty good job as well. Very happy with the Revelation's performance. Doesn't even have to be like integrated rigs. It can be fitted with normal rigs. It works literally the same way. Well, the same way. It's much cheaper to run the normal rigs than integration rigs. And one of the reasons why I stopped using integration rigs on most of my ships is the price for them. Well then, the Vindicator with the high power coil implant. Well, this thing is actually really good. The high power coil implant had issues, but those issues have been solved now, and I would say it's a very nice implant to have, and it's very nice to have an option between the thermocirculation and high power coil. Both implants are good for different reasons. The high power coil for the sustained DPS, the thermocirculation good for tank, and it's good for short high DPS. If you want, let's say, to blow something up as quickly as possible, you can easily do it with the thermocirculation. For longer battles, the the thermal circulation can be beneficial because of the tank, and for long battles the high power recoil can also be beneficial because of the sustained DPS that you can have. So with that being said, hope that you guys have enjoyed this little run with the Vindicator. Hope that I could help you at building your own ship, or at least, you know, I hope that I could inspire you to come up with your own build. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.